So it's no secret that DJI have been trying to fix the DJI Mavic 3 and the DJI Mavic 3 CINE since it first came out in November. And one of the newest additions to both of these drones through software updates has been ActiveTrack 5.0. Now, we actually got to test ActiveTrack 5.0 on this channel before it was released to the public, so we got to test the beta version. But now that the public version is out and available on every single Mavic 3 and Mavic 3 CINE, we figured that we should probably go ahead and retest it and see how it performs. Now, I actually have this area where I love testing ActiveTrack on all DJI drones, so I actually drove all the way out there to go ahead and test it. And this is actually the same area where I tested ActiveTrack 2.0 on my DJI Air 2S, and I'll leave the link for that video somewhere here in the description. And spoiler alert, the DJI Air 2S cleared that track pretty much without any major problems. There was a small hiccup at the end, but for most of the track, the DJI Air 2S killed it, no problems. Now this path is a forest trail with a bunch of trees and a bunch of branches, so I figured it was perfect to test the DJI Mavic 3, which is 4 times the cost of the DJI Air 2S and has omnidirectional sensors, which the Air 2S doesn't have. So in theory, it should clear it no problems. So I brought the DJI Mavic 3 CINE out to test at this spot, and the first thing that I actually wanted to test was that what resolutions and frame rates would ActiveTrack even, I guess, activate in, because previously on the old drones you could only do 4K at up to 30 frames per second. So initially in this test I was locked in at 5K at 50 frames per second, and ActiveTrack did not activate. And that's not surprising, I wasn't expecting it to, but then I bumped it down to 4K at 60 frames per second, and ActiveTrack was working perfectly fine. It was able to activate and all the menus were there. Now this is a huge upgrade over the older drones because you weren't typically able to use ActiveTrack in a higher frame rate, so I was happy about that. I also noticed that in the public version, you could finally record in D-Log, and before you were limited to normal mode. So this is great for serious creators because I personally don't use anything or any mode on the DJI drones that you can't use D-Log on, because I like to do my own color grading and I like that higher dynamic range. I also noticed that ActiveTrack was working in 2x zoom. Now this is a digital zoom, but it's still pretty cool to have the drone following you and using ActiveTrack in this 2x zoom. I can think of a bunch of scenarios where that would be useful. And finally, they also added color assist. So color assist is just a basic overlay that you can put on top of D-Log, so you don't have to stare at the washed out look of D-Log and you see colors as you would in normal mode, but you're still recording in D-Log. So this is great for like framing your shot and making sure that you pretty much kind of see everything you want to see and nothing's washed out and accidentally walks into your frame. So some really good additions to make the use of ActiveTrack much better. So I have the RC Pro here, and this is what I'm going to watch along on as I sort of recap what happened on the ActiveTrack test, and you guys are going to see the actual footage on your screen. So the first thing I did was a simple orbit test in ActiveTrack. I kind of just wanted to make sure that, you know, it was working, there was no flaws, and honestly it looked really, really smooth, which I was happy about, because in the beta versions of ActiveTrack there would be a lot of instances where the footage was jittery. So I was happy about the initial test of the orbit. After this, I just did a simple walking test with the ActiveTrack set to follow me from behind, and I was just walking towards the trail to kind of start the path. Now, this is where I noticed the first problem. As I was kind of walking, I was using the left joystick or the left thumbstick or whatever to lower the altitude of the drone while ActiveTrack was going on. Now, this is a feature that's been available in previous DJI drones that use ActiveTrack, and they lower their altitude while continuously tracking you. And I noticed that the Mavic 3 was not descending, and at that point I was kind of like, okay, you know what, no problem, it'll probably descend on its own when I actually get to the path. Now this was about the time where I actually started to get to the path and I was starting to walk in, and right away I noticed that the Mavic 3 was having a lot of issues just trying to get around this first tree, which was obviously concerning right away. And then this second tree pops up and it's still having a lot of issues moving forward. It did eventually lower its altitude to my level, so I was like, okay, I'm gonna keep backing up here a little bit because it was really just struggling to move forward. And then at some point I just turned around and I was like, okay, you know what, it's either gonna follow me or it's just gonna stop. So I keep walking and it finally makes its way past those trees, and you're gonna notice that it's moving really, really slowly. And I thought this to be pretty significant because it was moving much slower than the Air 2S was in this same ActiveTrack path, if you go check out that video. So that was just something I took of note, and I found that interesting, but I chalked it up to maybe the omnidirectional sensors. I was like, okay, maybe it's more careful because it can see more things and it's going a little bit slower. Anyways, let's get back to the video. So yeah, I keep walking and I'm just noticing that the sound is growing fainter because the drone is having trouble keeping up with me. And then there's this branch here and it's getting all confused again. So at this point I basically gave up. I'm like, okay, I'm just gonna walk back out of this trail and we're gonna restart. And this is where it kind of just got a life of its own and just crashed into a bunch of trees until it sort of regained itself, and then it crashed again. And then at this point, I'm just getting a bunch of error messages and it's just hovering. And this whole time, I'm mashing the pause button because I wanted to stop tracking me. I just wanted to stop where it is, but that was not working. So eventually it kind of just stopped on its own. And then I kept mashing the pause button and I wanted to stay like that. And then I walked into the forest and then I did a hand catch to get the drone down, as you see in the video. Now, I will say the build quality on the Mavic 3 CINE is excellent. Literally nothing broke on the drone, which I was really impressed by. I was pretty sure that something would be broken, but the only thing that really cracked was the edge of one of the propeller blades. And I don't know if you guys can see that. I'll try and put it in focus. If not, I'll just crop in later when I'm editing. But yeah, build quality on the Mavic 3 CINE, fantastic. Okay, so what did I learn from this experience using the DJI Mavic 3 CINE with the updated public ActiveTrack 3.0? It's still incomplete. It still has some ways to go until it's perfect, and there are a few reasons why I say that. And that first reason being that, yes, I understand that I set the active track direction to be behind me, but in previous drones, when you're being tracked from behind and you turn around and you start to walk towards it, the drone will naturally just back up. Now, you could argue that the Mavic 3 tried to swing around me and come behind me, but it has all these omnidirectional sensors, so just because it wanted to be behind me, I don't think it would risk its own safety to go through all those trees just so it can end up behind me. Also, it was having a lot of trouble even just dodging that first tree and just moving through the path in general, something that the Air 2S was able to do really, really easily on ActiveTrack 2.0 with less sensors. So yeah, DJI, there's still some work to do here. And I can see why a lot of people are still calling the DJI Mavic 3 and the DJI Mavic 3 CINE incomplete, especially the CINE version, because this drone right here, the CINE model, cost $5,000 with that whole premium bundle with the RC Pro and everything. So it's pretty inexcusable, especially 4 months after the release of this drone, for it to just be crashing through trees and not being able to follow me, something the Air 2S, which I have, yeah, right up there, my favorite drone of all time, is able to do without any issues and no problems. So yeah, expect probably some more software updates in the near future on the Mavic 3 CINE. That's it for this video, guys. Hopefully you guys enjoyed watching me test ActiveTrack 3.0, crashing the DJI Mavic 3 CINE. I had a ton of fun, obviously, doing that. But yeah, if you guys learned something new, as always, hit that like button, smash it, really helps out the video. If you guys are interested in drones, photography, filmmaking, all that stuff, then definitely subscribe to the YouTube channel. That's all I have for this one though. I'll see you guys next time, and until then, keep creating.